As I mentioned before, in this lesson, we are going to talk about the interface, take a little bit of a tour through it so you can start to see where things are going to appear that you're going to need to find to manipulate your images in Photoshop to send them to your non-linear editing application. Now, what I want to do is I want to start over here on the left-hand side with the toolbar. Now, what's important to keep in mind with a lot of these windows is you'll notice a little double arrow here at the top. I'll point one out here, I'll point one out here, and I will point one out over here. Now, these little double arrows give us the ability to either expand out any particular window. You'll notice now by expanding that window out, we don't have all the tools in a single line. They're actually broken up over two columns. Now, this is how Photoshop used to be laid out way back in the day, but obviously with the ability to clean things up a little bit, we can adjust all of these windows. If I don't need to see all the tools here, I can simply minimize this window, and as I need to see specific tools, I can click on them and they will pop out to show me whatever the specific command or function that they happen to do. Now, just for the sake of keeping things the way that Photoshop was when I launched it, I'm going to expand this window back out, but I do want to point out that if at any time you want to start moving windows around, what you have the ability to do is to take any one of these windows and you can actually move where their position is going to be. For example, if I'd rather have the adjustments appear over here in this window here, what I can do is simply take the adjustments tab, drag it right over here and drop it in like such. And now when I expand this window out, you'll see that I have the adjustments properties right down here at the bottom of the window. Now let's head back on over to the left side of the screen and talk about the toolbar. This is where we will find common tools, and I'm going to hover over just the move tool. And you'll notice that I get a dynamic pop-up up here, a dynamic tooltip mostly, that actually tells me that this is the move tool, and it tells me that it moves a selection or a layer. And I get a very visual representation of exactly what that tool does. And you'll notice that as I move down, we obviously get a different tooltip, and in some cases a different dynamic thumbnail showing me exactly what these tools do. Now, as we move through the different lessons, we'll be talking about different tools. So I'm not going to get too much in depth into them right here because I focus some lessons specifically on individual tools. So we'll get back to that in just a little bit. Now, what I do want to point out is actually this toolbar across the top. And the reason that I want to point this one out is because this toolbar here is actually directly impacted by what tool we have selected in the toolbar. You'll notice that as I click through the different tools, the actual toolbar across the top will change to give me the ability to input parameter information across the top so that we can work with the tools as we need to work with them. Again, we will talk more about those as we move along. Now, basically, the second most important thing other than the tools is the canvas. Now, some people might say it's more important than the tools, but basically the tools and the canvas go hand in hand. Now, we talked a little bit about the canvas in the previous lesson. What I do want to point out with the canvas is that if you want to zoom in or zoom out, you can simply use Command or Control and plus and minus on the keyboard, as well as the ability to press and hold the space bar to pan that window around. So if you need to get in and do precise work, you can zoom in pretty darn far and then pan around exactly as you need to focus in on any specific area of your image. All right. Now, next, let's just talk about this tab right here. This tab represents the current image that we are working on. Now, I can have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 images open, and they will appear as tabs across the top of the canvas. Now, I also want to point out this right here, which is called the ruler. Why? Well, because it looks like a ruler. And what this actually gives us the ability to do is to plot points anywhere in our image so we can find out exactly, for example, if I wanted to know roughly the point that's about here, so I could figure out the length and width to about here, you'll notice that as I move the cursor across, you'll notice that in the ruler I have this little line that goes across and up and down. And what I can do is come right over to here and say, okay, well, roughly this point here is at about 640-ish pixels in by about 590 pixels down. So this is actually a good way to be able to get in and actually pinpoint specific locations of your image, or to easily isolate an area and say, okay, this is roughly the area I want to work with, so we're going to take our image and crop it down to about this size if we needed to. All right, now you'll see across the top we do have our menu drop downs that we will again discuss in more depth as we need them, because you'll notice that there are a lot of tools, a lot of commands in here, a lot of which for the purposes of Photoshop for editors, you aren't going to use. So I'm not going to get too in-depth into them here, but what I do want to draw your attention to over here on the right-hand side is really two windows that we're going to focus a lot on in this course. One of which is right here, and this is the character window. When you get in and work with text, obviously creating the text and working with the characters is the most important thing you're going to need to do, and you'll have the ability to do that in this window in conjunction with the type tool located right over here in your toolbar. And last but certainly not least, you got a little bit of a preview of it in our last lesson, and that is the layers window. Obviously, we talked about one of the most important features of Photoshop is the ability to work with layers, and this is where you're going to be able to get in and to manipulate the layers, and you can see I can move them around like such very quickly and very easily inside the layers window. Now, like I said, I could get in and talk about each one of these windows, each one of these tools in depth, but to be honest, we don't need them all, and we want to keep moving forward. And in our next lesson, we're going to get in and create a new Photoshop element to work with inside of our nonlinear editing application.